So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to improve at chess. Now, in my personal opinion, the best way to improve at chess is by doing puzzles. I attribute most of my chess strength to how many puzzles I've done. I've done Puzzle Rush most of the time, multiple times per day, for basically every day since I started playing chess. So today I'm going to be doing a full Puzzle Rush and try and explain my thought process throughout the entire Puzzle Rush, even on the easy ones. I know more advanced players may think, oh, he's over explaining, but this is going to be geared more towards beginners at the start, and then advanced players will get more benefit towards the end. Here we go. Now, the first thing to look at in these puzzles is, how do I attack the king? There's the checklist that you always want to go through. Starts with checks. Number 2 is captures. And number 3 is attacks. Now here, we only have to go through the first step of the checklist. Checks. Where's the only check that's viable? Here. There is another check, but if you think about it, the king can move to 2 other squares. And you're not really going to have many other checks because, for example, if you give this check, the king goes here. You give this check, and the king goes here, and suddenly you don't have any more checks. And he's going to probably promote his pawn because it's unstoppable. He can protect it with his rook. He can protect it with his pawn. He can ultimately swing around and put his rook behind the pawn. He can do it even faster doing it this way with check. So ultimately, we need checkmate, or we're probably going to lose since these 2 pawns will stop our pawns from advancing that quickly. So here is checkmate. Notice how our king cuts off these 3 squares, so it's very similar to a back rank checkmate. Now here, go through the checklist again. Checks. I don't see any checks. There's no checks in position. Next is captures. There's this bishop you can capture, but then the knight takes back, and it's just a trade. And usually in puzzles, it's not just going to be a trade unless a trade forces a win of material. For example, if I could take this knight first, and then take the bishop would be free. Another capture is the knight. Again, the pawn just takes back, so it's just another trade. You can take this pawn. It does win a pawn. After knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes, queen takes, you just won a pawn. Cool. But you want to complete the look through that step of the checklist, see if there's anything better. There's one more decent looking capture. I'm not even going to look about this pawn because it just, there's 3 defenders. But you'll see that the queen is hanging. Now, before taking it, you also want to check if your queen is hanging. And it is not hanging. There's a pawn intercepting. So we're just going to take the free queen. This is a very common theme in this puzzle. As you can see, the king has no forward squares to advance to. So if we have a rook on the back rank, it's checkmate. And here, the knight can recapture. But we have a supporting rook behind it that can recapture and deliver checkmate. Okay, we are in check. So first we should look at captures. This is for a check. First you want to look at captures. Then you want to look at how can I block the check by putting a piece in front of it. Like for example, if the queen was on this square, could I put, let's say, a bishop back on the square? Obviously it's 1 square away, so we can't do that. And the third thing to look for is where you can move your king that is safe. Obviously here, the first step, this queen has no defenders, so we can simply just take it. Now here, start at the checklist again, versus checks. First thing you're going to look at instinctually is the rook, since it's the highest value piece. The only check with the rook is this check. So if you visualize, rook takes, this rook is going to take, and now all of a sudden you're just down a full rook. He has 2 rooks and you only have 1. In puzzles, it's kind of a theme. If you're down a lot of material, usually you're going to be checkmating or just winning massive amounts of material. Excuse me. And we do have another check, and fortunately, we can deliver checkmate here. It may be a bit harder to see since knight checkmates are a bit tricky, but if you look, check, so it hits the square. Now you have to check the escape squares of the king. So this is obviously just blocked by a pawn. This is blocked by a rook. You can't move to squares that pieces are on. And for this last escape square, your rook covers it. So therefore, this is checkmate. Okay, you want to go through checks again. And the only check in this position, I believe, yep. The only check in this position happens to be checkmate. This is a very common pattern since it's on the F file, and the F pawns are always really weak. So usually if you have two attackers on them and they're not castled, it's going to be a pretty decent attack. Now here is just completely game ending and you just win the game on the spot. This is a common pattern. When the queen is like adjacent to the king in like the corner area, and there's a piece protecting it, and it can't move to, let's say there was an extra square behind it, it can't move to the square above it, or it can't move to the square adjacent. So right here, because it's blocked by the queen. So in that case, it is checkmate. Here's another really common theme for puzzles. It's very similar to the back rank mate. Basically, you want to just shove the king back to where it can't move forward again. So here you just want to look for checks. This check, you just get taken. This check, you just get taken. This check, you just get taken. So therefore, the only viable check is here. If you notice, check, the only move the queen has, and the king has, is G1. That's the original square for the king to get back rank checkmated. So check. Notice this is a battery. There's only one defender of the back rank. Check. And checkmate. I believe you just want to look for checks here, and it's checkmate in 2. He weakened his king with this insanely weakening move of G3, along with moving the F-pawn as well. And your bishop is looking at this hole, and your queen can always jump on this diagonal as long as the F-pawn is moved. And of course the G-pawn is on G3. So if you visualize just a little bit, you can see after checking on the checklist, check, the only move is here. There's nothing that can block. There's nothing that can capture your queen. So after check, king there, and you can put your queen in front of the king along with a supporting piece, and there's nothing else protecting that square, it's checkmate. Okay, this one is kind of a common theme. It's actually a lot more common than like back rank mates in, I'd say, intermediate level games. This is like a pincer checkmate, I believe it's called. Basically, if you have a pawn or bishop on one of these two squares, when the G pawn is pushed, so like if I was black, it'd be on G6, and if I was white, it'd be on G3. And your queen can get to the opposite H or F square, and the queen cannot get to F1 to protect this square. And of course, there's not a bishop on H1. Then it's just unstoppable mate by putting your queen in front of the king. So by that logic, we can take. This is just desperate stopping checkmate for like one move. And on the next move, it would be checkmate. I believe this is just checkmate in 2. So you're just going to go through the checklist again. Check. Just rook takes. So that's not a good check. Next, you want to go with the bishop, since that's the only other piece that can give a check on the board. Now, if you notice, there's only one check with the bishop. It's protected with a pawn. So check. Now there's 2 moves to the king, and you have to calculate both. So after check, king here, check. The king's basically in stalemate, so something has to block. So the queen will block since that's the only piece that can block. And after you give this check on b7, you'll notice it'll be checkmate since the bishop is blocking its escape square. So check. Now we have to calculate the other variation. King a4. You will notice that this pawn is hanging to the bishop if you go through the checklist again. So just look for checks again. The bishop will be covering these 2 squares. After you give this check, he'll be covering this square. The pawn is covering this square. So the escape squares are here, here, here. These are all covered. The bishop is covering this square. The bishop is covering this square. So you can see from this diagram, the king is in stalemate. So if you give a check while the king is in stalemate, and there's no way to defend, or there's no way to capture the checking piece, it will be checkmate. Check. It doesn't even allow me to deliver checkmate. Okay, these ones are always like a little bit tricky to see. Yeah. So basically you just have to notice that these 2 squares are cut off. Wait, hold on. I was thinking this, but I have our king here. Oh, I just win the knight. Okay. Sorry, I'll explain more in depth now. So you just want to be looking for checks here. The only 2 checks are check. Now, if you give that check, the knight just recaptures and you just lost the knight for no reason. Now the other check is quite genius, and it's harder to see. It's a backwards knight move. You're simultaneously protecting your knight from the king attacking it, and you're also giving the king a check. This pawn is defended, so the king cannot come in and hurt you. And the only escape square is d4. Notice how these pawns do the important job of covering the d3 and c4 square. And if you visualize this position, you'll notice that the king and knight are on squares separated by 1 square. And those are the most vulnerable piece positionings to get pawn forked. And you'll notice the knight is controlling the square since it previously checked the king on that square. So it's controlling the square. And you can push a pawn to that square now. And that pawn will simultaneously put the king in check and also attack the knight. And we just take the piece after looking for like any sacrifices or checkmates. But also the capture was a check, so it was pretty safe. Okay, so you have to look for checks here and notice you have a battery here. Obviously it's a bit scary since your queen's attacked, but you just have to hunker down, go through the checklist, trust the process. Now, the only check I believe is with the knight. It's a bit tricky to see since you technically are sacrificing a full knight, but you just have to look a little bit further. Another key thing to notice is that if the knight wasn't there and it was your move, this rook's hanging. Only the king's defending it, but you have a rook and a queen looking at the square. So by that logic, if you can move this knight out of the way and also make it so he has to either capture it or move the king, it's now your move and you're looking at the square. And also the rook can't capture the diagonal. So by that logic, we can give this discovered check. And this also happens to be checkmate. Yeah, I believe this is just back rank checkmate with a common theme. So If you visualize the only check in the position besides this one was defended by 2 pieces and attacked by 1, so it's just immediately cross it off your list. You give this check on the back rank. Visualize the queen's also protecting the square, so you have to be a little bit careful. But if you visualize, if the rook comes back, you can take with the queen, queen takes, rook blocks, and rook takes checkmate, since there's no forward square to the king to go to. But there's a tricky move here. Queen c1, what if queen blocks? Because then your rook's disconnected by this rook. But there's this theme called an X-ray. Through that rook, the rook will see the queen on d1. So your queen will be looking at that square, and also the rook will be looking at that square. So if you capture the queen with check, the rook takes, your rook is still looking at that square. And it's the same thing as before. This rook has to block, only a legal move, and you take with checkmate. In-game resolutions are like always a bit annoying to calculate since they're usually a bit longer, but they make up for that in simplicity at these lower levels. So the first thing you want to look for in pawn endgames is, can I promote before they can? And in this case, it's pretty clear. You can just count. Also, you have to make sure your king is controlling a square and the other king can't control that square before you can. And here, since your king's already controlling it, you don't really have to worry about it. So now if you calculate really simply, push, 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 queen, push, and now it's your move. And here, the simplest thing to do is just put your queen all the way back on e1 so they cannot make a queen on the next move. And it's the same thing if they take, since they're still the same distance away. It's the same, they're moving 1 square forward either way. So push, push, queen. Okay, this one, again, you just start off with a checklist. Check. Let's see. The king goes here now. And all of a sudden, you don't have any more checks that work. Because if you give a check, it's just a trade. Actually, if you give a check, the bishop just takes and you look like a fool. So check here. Check, the pawn takes. So there's nothing there. Check here, check, no. So this check you can just roll out. Check, just bishop takes, and it's a trade. And you're not going to queen that pawn just by looking at this pawn as defending the square in front of it. This check is no good because the king can just run away, and you're not going to checkmate or win any material if the king is far away from your pieces. But there's still one more piece we haven't looked at. Here. Now you notice here, the king can still run away. But there's still one more check we haven't looked at. This check. And if you notice here, it's also attacking the rook. And your king is also attacking the rook. So that's just a free rook. Here is actually kind of funny. He self-checkmated himself, that's what it's called, since he blocked his escape square with his own piece. So just look for any checks in the position besides this one, since it's just silly because it can be attacked. Be captured by the queen. So if you look for any good checks, you'll see queen h4. Square is undefended. Make sure there's no weird thing across the board like a queen here. You can get caught by that sometimes. I know I have. So if you look at this check, and now where are the escape squares? If here, that's your queen's still looking at that square, so that's not illegal. The knight just blocked its escape square. You can't move through pawns or queens or bishops. And let's see, is there anything that can block? No, the rook can't go here. The knight can't teleport. Okay, it's checkmate. So let's start by counting off material. 1, 2, 3 minor pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4 minor pieces. We have 2 rooks. They have 2 rooks. Pawns are not really going to matter since there's so much material left on the board. Now, let's start by looking at checks. And there appears to only be one. So check, takes, and now you realize that there is another check in this position now, since this rook has moved off the back rank, opening up the king. And if you give a check there, knight is the only defender, and you can recapture with the other rook, winning a piece. And once the other rook blocks, you can recapture with a check, and after the king takes, in fact, on the first move of this puzzle, you'll notice that the bishop took your knight, and that's not very nice, so we're going to take it back. So, check, 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 and captures. And you won a piece in the end. Sorry, I'm just calculating, figuring it out for myself. Now here, it's like kind of tricky. So you only have one viable check. You're just going through the checklist again. Just persistently going through the checklist and make sure you calculate the variation before you discount it, unless it just kind of looks stupid. Like it gets recaptured by a pawn or something and not attacking anything. So here, there's only one decent check. By decent, I mean completely winning. C5. Now, if you remember, if you've been reading up on chess, there's a rule called en passant. So, hey, the pawn can actually capture there. Oh, the heck, it's not checkmate. What are you doing? But, what else was this pawn doing before it captured? It's the only defender of this rook. And it's forced because if en passant was not a rule, it'd just be checkmate. So it's completely forced. Check. And takes. And here's just some extra shenanigans, because puzzles do that sometimes. Let's see here. Is this the first puzzle where there's not a check? Well, besides the lobster pincer mate. So, what do? There's no checks. We're stuck. So, what's next on the list? Captures. Well, let's see here. There's a capture here. Does it do anything? Well, let's calculate. After queen takes, let's say, okay, well, I can attack the queen now, right? G4. What about just queen h4? Or even queen back? Can you attack it now? I do not believe you can. Your dark squared bishop cannot magically see it. There's no knight attacks anymore. Well, there's no knight attacks, period. Unless the queen goes back to this square, but then you have this. But then they still have this square to go back to. So, that capture isn't viable. I don't believe there are any other captures, not that I can see at least. So next on the checklist, the last step, attacks. What can you attack? Now let's start by attacking the greatest material possible. Obviously that's not the king since we already went through checks. So the next most valuable piece, the queen. Can we attack the queen? Yes, we can. What's the most obvious one? Knight e4. After queen back, calculate. It's the only move. You can't go to these 3 squares since the bishop covers that one. Right, those are the only moves. So here, if here, you actually have to be careful, but you can play f6, and the queen is trapped in that position, I believe. Yeah, the queen's trapped in that position, so that doesn't work. So therefore, the only square is here, and you'll notice your bishop defended this square, and these are separated by one square. What did we talk about earlier? Pawn forks, and that is the case for this puzzle. Oh boy. So one thing to notice is this square is covered, so it can't like run out into the center and make it annoying to checkmate. This square is also cut off. There's a check here. That's the main thing to notice, I would think. Just going through the checklist, that seems to be the only check. So let's calculate the check. Check. Can't go here, it can't go here, and it can't go to these two squares since your queen covers them. So therefore, the only move, since your queen can't be captured, or... Oh wait, it can be blocked. Oh no, what do we do? But you'll notice, a piece is controlling this square, so we do have another check in that position. We have check. And now the only move is for the king to go back. And then, then what do we do? Check. Check, bishop here. Check, king here. I think you just want to bring another piece into attack, and it's unstoppable checkmate. It's a little bit harder to see, a bit more advanced. So let's start off, check. Okay. Well, it just played a worse move in my opinion, a less challenging move. If you notice here, king's on the back rank. So the most vulnerable square when the king's on the back rank is usually one in front of it. It's not always the case, it could be defended. But always look at the 3 pawns or 3 squares in front of the king. And if you'll notice, the bishop is controlling this square. The queen sees that square as well. There's nothing else defending that square, therefore it's checkmate. Okay, this one you're looking for checks. Again, this check just recaptures. You don't have a battery. Your queen's not gonna make a battery with the king. Any other checks? Any other checks? Oh, there's a tricky check over here. Let's see. Long range bishop check. Those are a little bit hard to see. Now if you'll notice, there's only one move for white here, and that's to put the king over here. Since it can't move onto the e-file, your queen would capture it. So after check, it's very easy to calculate it since there's only one move. I mean, there's this move as well, but you just capture and it's the same deal. So check. King here. Just look for checks again, the start of the checklist, and you'll notice that now you can play this move. And it's back rank mate. Since the rook is cut off by the king, this rook is cut off by the knight, and it's back rank checkmate. Yep. Okay, just going through the checklist again. Check. Push. I believe is the only move, and I believe this is checkmate, if I'm not mistaken. I was also calculating this first, so for people who saw that, I did too. But if you calculate a little bit further, king up, queen f7, the king actually just runs away. Oh wait, hold on, is that not checkmate? What am I missing? Hold on, wait, check. Here, check. Pawn protects the square, the queen cuts off. So, wait. What's... Is there 2 checkmates here? I'm confused. Check. Push, check. Oh wait, yeah, no, that's what I'm not seeing. I forgot what I calculated. My bad. So, yeah, if you'll notice, this check just recaptures, and your check isn't a check anymore. Anyways, just starting off the checklist. Check. This is the only move since all these squares are covered, either by a piece or your piece is covering the square. So the only legal move is to push this pawn. You'll notice this square is undefended, so you can just take it, and it's the same deal. And the queen's in check, and it's checkmate. I mean, the king's in check, not the queen. Okay, this is similar to the theme we saw on this puzzle that I'm hovering over right now. It's the one where the bishop controlled basically the exact same square. Yeah, literally the exact same square. So you'll notice the king isn't on this square. So if my queen just teleported that square, the king would go there. Of course, it would still be checkmate, but that's not how it's going to go. First, this check. Whenever you can give a check on this square, like adjacent to the king, it'll be forced one square sideways. If it's on the back rank. If it's on the back rank. I should clarify that. So if it's forced to move one square over, it's on the same square as the other puzzle. And the bishop's looking at the same square too. And your queen's looking at the same square too. And if it's checkmate there, it's probably checkmate here too, since there's no other piece defending it. Okay, let's look at checks. Check. Oh, I lost my queen. That's not working. Check. Rook takes. It's nothing. There's one more check. Check. Let's see. The only move is to move my rook back. And if you take, it's just a trade, so it's not that. So after rook back, you have to look for checks again. This check still doesn't work, but there's another new check that there wasn't the first time. Queen e6 check. And notice the rook can't come back to block it since it's pinned to the king by your rook on d8. So the king will be forced to move to h8. There you will capture the rook with check, forcing the knight back. And the puzzle won't go this far, but that will both be checkmate with your queen, but also if you like disrespect, you will take with your rook and deliver checkmate with the rook. Check. Check. Okay. That was a bit lame. Okay, so here, we're just starting off with checks. It's a bit board geometry here, so this will help your board vision after practicing for a while. So here, looking for checks. Check. The king just recaptures. There's no other supporting piece. But board geometry and board vision, you'll notice this pawn is removed in front of the king. So if anything can be on the g file in front of this pawn, and it's a queen or a rook, it'll be check. So we calculate that. Check. Can anything block? No, no, no. Nothing can block. So check. It can't go this way. So there's only one move. King h1. And after that, there's one check that wins the game, I believe. Okay, there's one check that cleanly wins the game with the least amount of calculating. And there's just a very obvious check on g2, being supported by your bishop. The king's in the corner. There's nothing protecting the square, so it's checkmate. Also, you have to be careful. This pawn is really helping out, intercepting the queen from that square's view. Check. Okay, just one move. Okay, so this one's a bit complicated. So this pawn, really scary. Your king can't get over since this rook is being very annoying. You'll notice your rook is hanging. You'll notice that this knight is hanging. But if you take the knight, he just pushes. And all of a sudden, what's happening? I'm actually not sure about this puzzle. So I'm going to do a moment of calculating first. I believe the simplest thing to do is take the rook. Since there's no checks. So next is captures. Obviously, the first thing you think of is free piece, but you have to be a little patient here. If you can trade material while you're up material, it's a good idea. And if you think about it, you can consider it, you already are up the knight. Since after you capture, this is worth more than the knight, and the knight can't give any checks. So it's going to lose the knight after you recapture the piece, since the bishop won't defend the knight from this square. So I believe the simplest thing to do is take, bishop takes, rook takes, push, and just put your rook behind the pawn. Okay. Apparently I don't know what I'm talking about. It's disorienting. I want to look at that one afterwards. I'll do it on my own, but interesting. Yeah, on those weird ones that you get wrong, you just have to force yourself to go back and be like, what did I miss? Why doesn't this work? And deal with it. Okay, so checks. Check. Captures. Check. Now let's see here. After the check, there's nothing protecting the square, nothing can take it, nothing can intercept it. It's on the square adjacent to the king. It's a check, and it can't be captured back because the bishop's supporting. So after the king moves here or here, hey look, the bishop's hanging. It's a free piece. And here you just have to calculate a little bit further. It's being a little tricky, but you'll notice the bishop protects the rook. And if you don't notice that, it's fine. You'll get it with practice. This one's actually, is it a little funny? I think you are winning a piece here, I believe. Again, I'm going to calculate first, go along with my thought process. So first thing I'm looking at is checks. Let's see. Check, just takes. Same case with the bishop. If check, can actually just block, and it's a little bit scary. And the bishop's coming here. You know, your queen's under attack. Just not really an easy position to actually calculate with, since it's so complicated. But if you'll notice, if you take here, there's two recaptures. He can't capture your queen since your rook pins to the king. So there's knight takes and there's queen takes. Let's calculate both of them. Rook takes rook. Queen takes rook. Queen takes knight, since the queen left the side of this. Now, there's no back rank mate. Your rook covers that square, the one that's still in the corner. So there's still one more thing to calculate. Be patient. Rook takes. Knight takes. Now what was this knight doing earlier? Covering this square. Now let's see. Your queen and bishop, look at this square. The escape square is covered. So therefore, queen h7 will be checkmate. What? Okay, what? I'm a bit confused on that one, honestly. We need to go back and look afterwards. I apologize. I thought I would do a lot better. This one is just a classic checkmate. So after check, the only move you'll notice is king up. And if you calculate one move further, don't get scared of your knight hanging. There's still another check. And you'll notice all these squares are covered. And it's checkmate. If I get this one wrong, I should quit. This one is another back rank mate concept. After simply queen takes, king takes. It's not checkmate now, but if you give a check, forcing the king back to the square, you can deliver checkmate. Okay, so you'll notice your pawn and queen are both looking at the square, but also the knight's covering the square, so you can't play checkmate right now. But look at captures next. Hey look, that annoying knight that's protecting the square, I can take it. And after either one of these takes, you'll still be looking at the square with both pieces, and it'll be checkmate. Okay, just calculate a little bit further. These are actually really annoying. So if I go up, there will be a queen check, and that looks very bad. If you go here, there's this check, and then you're going to be forced onto one of these squares, and you're just going to be annoyed with all these checks. The simplest thing to do, by rule of just ruling out all the other scary moves, is after you'll notice here, where's the checks? You can't get on the file, can't get on these diagonals, so therefore there's no checks. And look, still checkmate. Trying to find out the theme of this puzzle. So the first thing I'm thinking right now is knight here. It's protecting my bishop, and it's threatening the fork between king and the rook. Can you defend that? Yes. You can just go king over there, and now what? You kind of just look silly. And your rook is still hanging. The next thing that comes to mind is just simple defense. Just knight out, and you look, your queen just defends, right? But after queen takes, I mean your bishop's hanging now, your knight's loose, your king is not castled, you're just really getting bullied. So it's probably not knight d2. Now let's see. Can you trap the queen at all? Let's see. You can't put a bishop on the square. It's protecting the rook. Let's see. You can put the queen here, or here. This just seems a little bit more active to me. Also protects this square. I mean, this also protects that, but it protects it more directly, in my opinion. It also is slightly vulnerable to this. So after here, queen takes, knight back to b3. I'm trying to figure out the difference. I think it is queen c2 rather than b3, exactly because of this move. So let's calculate. Queen b3, queen takes, knight c2, hitting the queen. There's no escape squares now for the queen. Knight b5. You have to look at all three of these squares still. So after here, he has this really annoying move, e6, while looking at your queen. So again, you're just getting queen kind of harassed, and ultimately you're going to be forced from one of these three squares. So ultimately, you're just going to go here. After queen takes, here. If your knight gets attacked, you just take the queen. Okay, well, apparently I miscalculated, so we're going to go back and look. 3%. What is the solution? Okay, you just take. I thought there was something scary about this pawn, but apparently I was wrong. I miscalculated. I just have to learn from your mistakes. Let's look at the other one. Solution. Check. Check. And it's the same concept, I believe. I think my way was also decent, especially as a human. But maybe there's some crazy computer defense. Last puzzle to look at. Trapped piece. Queen takes. It was probably our other variation was fine. Queen b3, I'm assuming. Queen takes. Knight Oh wow, that's crazy. I mean, look, all your pieces on the back ring. It's just hard to see all these backwards moves together. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't even notice there was that knight backwards move. Yeah, the queen's just trapped here. We were on the right concept, but we executed it wrong. Anyways, that is my puzzle video. I hope it helped at least a little bit, even though I kind of trolled a little bit on my score. But yeah, I hope this helped, and good luck on your improvement.